Welcome everyone to our class on how to open the depths of Torah. It's called iyun, how to look into the Torah and see the messages that the Kodesh Baruch Hu wants us to receive and what he wants us to do. I just wanted to go back on one little point here that we left off last week. We said it, but I just want to make something absolutely clear here. In this little chart that I made, breaking down the Mishnah, so you mentioned it, and I just want to make clear that the two divisions here, where the Mishnah stops and where the Gemara begins. Okay, so the Mishnah, we said, has six Sidrei Mishnah. We said 6 topics. There, each one is broken down into, excuse me, it's not working. Just give me 1 second here. Oh boy. All these nice technical things happening today. There we go. Okay. There we go. All right. So we said here's my little pointer. We said the Mishnah is broken down into 6 orders. They're called 6 Sidrei Mishnah, and each Mishnah has its its Masechtot. Okay, Masechtot, these little books which speak about the various topics, subtopics in the Mishnah. So Nezikin has all these subtopics that we mentioned, including the one we're going to be involved in, which is Baba Kama, and each Masechet in the Mishnah has its prakim, the chapters. So the chapters in our Mishnah, for instance, of Baba Kama is going to be Arba Avos and Ketzad HaRegel and Hamanich, etc. Always using the first word, the first significant word of the Mishnah. Then we in a chapter of Arba Avos, so then you have Mishnah 1, Mishnah 2, Mishnah 3, Mishnah 4, Mishnah 5. That's what it's. They're given numbers at that point. At this point, the red line I just indicated is where the Gemara will begin. Now, every Talmud starts with the Mishnah and then gives the commentary of the Amoraim. We said the Mishnah generally talks about case and law, and the Gemara will then explain the sources of the laws and reconcile any seeming contradictions in the between Mishnayot. So our particular Mishnah of Arba Avos, the first Mishnah we said, this one is broken down into Sugiot, okay? And here's this red line. Below the red line is the Gemara analyzing each one of the Mishnayot. So the first Mishnah is called Arba Avos, and it has these 7 commentaries or Sugiot talking about different lines, line by line in the Mishnah. The Gemara goes line by line and explains the sources, as we said, and any other brightot, external information that may shed light on the Mishnah or contradictions that we have. So then we gave this quick example, not a quick example, obviously, of a sugya. The statement in our Mishnah said Maven Hever, and there's 4 avos, the Shobor Maven Hever. On Maven Hever, the Gemara then spoke about the avot and told us that there's 4 avot mentioned in our Mishnah, but we have brightot, which are Mishnahs that weren't compiled in Rabbi Yehuda's compact version of the Mishnah that we have, but were compiled by his students, Rav Chia, Rav Oshia, and they're used by the Gemara to, as I said, shed light on the Mishnah itself, because the Mishnah is extremely highly compact, and every time that they wrote down a word in the Mishnah, they had a darshan, a pasuk that said, Eis lasos l'Hashem hefer Torah secha. You're not supposed to write down Torah Shabbat Peh, and when they realized that they had to do it or else it would be lost, so they were very, very careful in what they wrote and how much they wrote. They wrote the minimum. So the students, Rav Osher, Rav Chia, gathered together all the external texts that were not written, and they presented them in a unified way. And the Gemara uses that to elaborate on our text. So we said that whereas our Mishnah said that there's 4 avos, 4 principal categories, we said Rav Oshia said that there's 13, and Rav Chia said that there was 24. And the Mishnah goes, the Gemara goes into a lengthy discussion of how these cases are organized. What we wanted to get down to was at the end of that discussion, the Gemara made an inference and said, look, our Mishnah, by using the word av, means that there's toldos, this means there's subcategories, and that makes a lot of sense because there are subcategories of the shor, the bor, mav, and the hever. We'll show that in a little while. But the Rav Chia and Rav Oshia talk about things like the shomer. They don't have any derivatives. When a shomer doesn't, it means the person who's watching something is negligent and someone steals it or he loses it, so he has to pay, depending on what his type of shmir he took upon himself. But anyway, those things don't have derivatives. They're just single cases without derivatives, so why would the word avos be used? So the Gemara says they're using it because all the extra ones that they mentioned, whether it be the 13 or the extra 24, minus, of course, the ones in our Mishnah, all the other ones also have a similarity to the avos. Just like the avos all pay from the best, and the person who's the damager has to pay from the best of his field, so too all the other damages also have to pay from the best of their field. And the way we learned that is through this Gezerah Shava of Tachas Nasin L'Shalom Kesef. Okay, so we made our little chart. I revised our chart just to show it to you, and since did a lot of work on it, I just want to present it to you. We looked at the verse that talks about paying with the best of the land, and we found that it's a verse that talks about shein and regel. What does it mean, shein and regel? When a man sends an animal to another man's field and the animal eats the produce of the other man's field, that's the nickname used in the Gemara. We call it shein. It means he's got he used his teeth to eat the food, as opposed to regel, where the animal just wandered around the other person's field and smashed a lot of his beautiful tomato patches over there. So in that pasuk that talks about shein v'regel in the Chumash, in the Torah, it says ubir b'stei acher meitav sedeo meitav kamer yishalem. That's what it says. It says that the person who sent his animal into the other man's field has to now repay or pay for the damage with the best of his field or the best of his vineyard. So how do we get from this particular verse to all those other cases? How does it happen? So all the Mishnah tells us is 4 words. The Gemara. Tachas Nesina Yishalem Kesef. And from there, this law of paying with the best of your field now is going to spread to all the cases that Rav Oshia and Rav Chia said, plus 2 other ones which they didn't say, which were special categories. How was all that done? So here, whoops, I'm sorry. We said the first way that it's done is through the similar word of shilem. So here's our Arbavas Nazikin, the shore. Karen, for instance, when a shore gores, that's the 3rd type of damage a ox can do. So that in that pasuk it says shilem yishalem, shalem yishalem shor tachas shor. And bor, we said, was the second one of the major damages. That says Val Habo Yishalem. And then man, it says Maka Nefesh Behemi Yishalem. The person who damages another person's animal must pay. And Hever is fire. It says Shalom Yishem Hamavir Es Bira. The person who lights the fire and destroys man's property. It also says Shilem. So that word Shilem is the bridge we said, Gezerah Shava, handed down from Moshe Sinai, to tell us that this link exists in these four cases. Now, the other cases that the Torah talks about are the cases of Shomrim, different types of Shomrim, whether you're paid to guard or whether you're doing it for free or whether you're borrowing or renting something. These three cases are mentioned with the word Shalem, and then the Torah goes on to talk about people who steal other people's property and they have to pay it back, a Ghana for a Goslin. Also use the word Shilem. So all those cases said the word Shilem. Now here in this case of Karen, it says Shalem Yishalem Hashor Tachas Hashor. That was the second. Tachas Nasini Shalom Kesev. That was the next word that we had to investigate. So, boom, we see that this word Yishalem is mentioned in Tsar when a man rapes another person, or a man damages another man, or he inflicts pain. He has to pay for those things on the man that he damaged. So those Pesukim said the word Tachas in it. So we said that the din of Meitav, if he wants to pay with the best of his land, has to spread over there. Then there's this case of onus. What is the case of onus? Of rape. There it said, V'nosan ha'ish hashochev imo la'avi hana'ara chamishim kesev tachas asher ona. So there's the word nosan, and that moved the din of Meitav to Ripui and Sheves. That means the person when he damages another man has to pay for the doctor bills and also for the work that the victim lost by being damaged. And from the word Kesev in this pasuk, the din of Meitav spreads to Motzi Shemra, a man who claims that his wife was not a virgin, and she was. That's called Motzi Shemra. And Kesev also goes to the case of Maflat, not only rape, but if he entices a woman and he lives with her. So that's the spread. Those four words, very compressed now through this explanation of the Rishon Reb Hananel, now extends to all these cases. Now, we said that the Gezerah Shav is very unique because in logic there's no reason why two words in two different Pesukim mean the same thing. If it would, then we could make one big mess of the whole Torah. So there's only a limited amount of Gezerah Shavas. You can't do it on your own. But there's another form of extension which is talks about these toldos, for instance. So in Jane, we have derivative cases which are equal in to our case of Shane. Shane means that the animal damaged by going after his tivers and getting some benefit from what he did, eating the food. So from there, we're going to derive that if an animal damaged fruits for his hanor, strange case, he went to he defecated on peros, or he was rubbing his back against the wall and the wall came tumbling down. That's also a benefit he was getting since he was getting his nice back scratched. So he would also have to pay. So that's a movement that's through analogy, or mamatzino, through logic. Since there's a similar factor in both cases, then we can move the din over to that case. So from this little these four cases that we're going to investigate in depth, the Shor, the Bor, the Mam, and the Heber, we see that there's extensions through the Gezerah Shava and through Mamatzia. So that was just a brief overview. Now let's get back to our little article, which we're trying to. Okay. Okay. Now, here in this text, you can relate it as just a breakdown of all the, all the Mishnahs and what they say. Okay. And what we did the last time also was we analyzed this case, and we said that the thinking, just like I made an analogy, just like when we went to school, at least we had to memorize the times table. And now if you ask a child, what's 4 times 3, he'll just open up his little calculator and press some buttons. The same thing happened with Jewish learning. Jewish learning occupied tremendous amount of gray matter. I mean, what was written was the Chumash, and all this information had to be memorized and analyzed in one's head. So as unfortunately the generations became weaker and weaker, so we said Rabbi Yehuda Nasi wrote down the Mishnah, and then the Mishnah had to be clarified or expanded upon, or explained is a better word, with the Gemara. Now, what some people might not see, because the text of the Gemara is just a page with a column in the middle, what a person might not recognize is the strict structure that the information is packed. Information is packed in a very, very, very strict structure, and that structure is meant to be seen in one's mind. But as we mentioned, our minds are not that well focused. So what I did was, what I do all the time is I take a text, whether it be the Chumash, or whether it be the Mishnah, or whether it be the Gemara, or whether it be the Rishonim, whoever it is, and I take a digital version of it, and I start doing 2 very simple activities. One is, whenever there's an end of a statement, I do an enter, which creates a new line, and then I look at the relationship of one line to the next. If the first line is a statement and there's a question on that statement, so that'll be a question on the statement on the same line. But if, as a result of that question, we have here's an answer, it'll be on the same line. If we have a result of this answer, we'll have another difficulty. So I indented one. As a result of that difficulty, and we solved that difficulty, and yet there's another difficulty, so I indented again. And by doing this, all of a sudden what appears is a logical picture of the argumentation process. And that helps understand what the process is about. For instance, the Gemara that we're going to be doing, there's a beautiful, a very long interlude between one of the debates, and then the whole question will be, after a page and a half of argumentation, whether the next person is responding to a question that happened a page and a half ago, or no, it's a new piece of information. So by doing this method, of which I gave a nickname called visual logic, we're able to ask ourselves those questions and to see exactly the interaction and who's doing what and when. So in this little piece of Gemara, we explained we did this last week, so I'm not going to go very much into it, but we explained the reasons why our Tana said 4, and Rav Oshia and Rav Chia eliminated other possibilities, and we got to our question of Bishlema Tana Didan that used the word avos, so we know that there was toldos, but we didn't understand why Rav Chia and Rav Oshia said that term, since we said that only 4 of them in their list have avos, so the Shulbam, Av, and Hever, the rest of them don't. So we wanted to know why that term was used, and we discussed secondary and primary terms over there. And we gave, and the Gemara gave this example, my timer. What's the reason they used it? Because of this Gezerah Shava. So it's remarkable that these four words mentioned in the Gemara are the key to that whole chart that we just showed, which shows the spread of this particular law mentioned in one pasuk to all the other cases of damage. And that's basically where we left off. Okay. So okay. So what we're doing now is we're trying to just give an overview of the levels of unpacking the information. What does that mean? The highest level of compression is the Chumash itself. Kadosh Baruch Hu, when he thought about the whole universe, had to compress all that information into a relatively small amount of words. And that's what he did. And he handed us the Torah Shel Peh, which are the rules. We said the formulas to open up that information into its very specific parts. And we said the first level of opening up that information is the Mishnah. As the Mishnah said, this Arva Avos Nasik, and we're going to be, by the way, we're going to take each level and slowly go into it. This is just an overview of the general picture, just to give a general idea of where we're going, because I don't want to get bogged down in one little point and then we lose the whole forest because we're in one little leaf, which is very easy to do. So we said that the most compact information is the Chumash, the written law, and the Kodesh Baruch Hu handed orally to Moshe Rabbeinu all the keys to open up that text, and that was handed down orally until Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, around 200 in the common area, when the Romans were really having a field day with Klal Yisrael. There was a little break of time, and he was a very wealthy man. He gathered all the Chachamim together, and he compiled all the learning in the Mishnah that we have today. So that's the first level of unpacking the information, looking at the Mishnah and seeing what new things it tells us. So for instance, in our Mishnah, which said Arba Avos Nazikin, we noticed the word Avos, which already tells us a brand new concept. That's what's mentioned in the Chumash is in damages are not unique cases. In other words, only when an animal uses his horn and gores another animal does the owner who did the damage have to pay. But no, that represents a categorical case that whenever an animal intends to do damage, whether it's with his horn, which is mentioned in the Chumash, or whether he kicks another animal, or whether he squats on another animal, then the owner also has to pay. So that's the big, you see, key already in the Mishnah. The Mishnah now opens up that level, showing us that this particular case is not a particular case, but actually represents a general principle. And from that general principle, now we open up the field of damage to a whole set of other cases. So that's level, what we call level 1 of decompression. Okay. Now, the Gemara then gives us the next level of decompression, where it tells us through this inference from our Mishnah, that our Mishnah said Avos, and the Reb Chia and Reb Oshi didn't use the word Avos to describe their cases, that not only do the cases not only does the case of Shein and Regel have the din of having to pay with the best of your land, but through this Gezerah Shava of Tachas Sini Shalom Kesef, it spreads to all the other types of damages. So that's another level of unpacking the information, okay? Whereas the only thing that was mentioned in the Chumash with this din of Meitav was Shor and Regel. It's the only place you'll find it. But through this inference, we've unpacked a whole nother level of information by being handed this Gezerah Shava of Tachas Nasina Yishalom Kesef. And that with Gezerah Shava, we're able to now extend this local din, this local law, to all these other cases. So look what we just did. We said level number one is the Mishnah. It told us there's Arba Avos. Once I know it's an Av, I know that there's Toldos, which means logically I'm allowed to extend this din, okay, to other similar cases, okay. So that was a tremendous decompression of the information. Now the Gemara in stage 3 told us that there's another level of decompression, and that's called a Gezerah Shava, also handed down from Moshe Sinai, which is not mentioned in the Mishnah, but it's handed down orally and written down around 200 years after the Mishnah is written down. But that oral key now of Tachas Nasina Yishalom Kesef will now extend this din to all these other cases. Okay? Here's the Shalom cases.
Can I ask you a question?
Tachas. You can ask me anytime, please. Please.
So just about this, in the time of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, before the Gemara actually laid out the Gezerah Shava, so he would have known that. He didn't write it down, but he would have known that the Gezerah Shava was there, right?
100%. I'm glad that you clarified that point. He knew everything. He knew all the oral law. But when it came down to...
Yeah, Moshe Rabbeinu would have known that as well, right?
Yes, 100%. They have to, by the way, they have to. There's no one can use this method of Gezerah Shava unless it was handed down from Hashem to Moshe and Moshe all the way down the line. But as we mentioned, there's a prohibition against writing down the Torah Sheba'al Peh. So when Rabbi Yehuda Nasi had to do that, he had to do it in such a way that he wrote down the minimum of what was necessary to keep the understanding of Torah going. But there's a lot of information that he kept oral. For instance, here with this Tachas Nasina Yishalom Kesef was handed orally to the students. Okay, it wasn't written down. Yeah.
Why did he feel? I don't quite get. Why did he feel justified in writing down the Arba Avos, but which are based, I guess, on logic, but not the ones that are based on Gezerah Shava?
Okay, I can't answer that question. That's a very, very deep question. I can't answer why Yehuda Anasi wrote down what he did and left what he did to the students. Okay, I only answer you generally. Generally, he wrote down the most general principles. So the Arba Avos is the most general principle. Okay, after we know that there's Avos, then you could now, I suppose, use Tachas Nasina Yishalom Kesef, which is these cases, that have that din. In other words, I'm asking you briefly, there's major moves and then there's minor moves. Okay, the major move is to know that these Arba Avos are Avos, that they're cases which represent categorical principles. Okay. The minor move of how to move them to these other cases, which are not the Arba Avos, he left oral. Okay, because that's a stage 2 level. More than that, I can't really say. That's a very, very deep question, and it has to be looked at every time. Every time that we get information that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi didn't write down. For instance, he also didn't write down the other bright tot. In other words, Rev Ocean, Rev Chia had other texts that spoke about 13 and 24. You see, he only wrote down the 4. He didn't write down the other ones. Okay, so the Gemara. Yeah, you go ahead.
Just, I don't necessarily expect you to know the answer to this either, but just offhand, do you know that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi ever write down anything based on Gezerah Shava?
I can't answer that question.
Oh, okay.
I can't answer it. The answer is I don't know.
That's fine.
Okay. I'd like to be able to... No, I don't know.
I thought maybe that had something to do with it. Maybe he wanted to stick to something more logical.
Could be.
And somehow Gzera Shava belongs to a pure Torah Shebaal Peh. I don't.
Could
just
be.
Speculate.
Again, no, I understand. I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's always important to speculate, and then what you have to do is be responsible. And as you said, can I make a statement about all of Mishnayos and all? I can't. There are people like Shas Cohen that can. I certainly can't. So, but it's always good to speculate. I mean, and then what you do is you can make an observation here and give a theory, and then see if it holds as you go through all the Mishnayos and all through the Shas. You're welcome to do that. But the answer is the bigger you are, the bigger you can see. Okay, so Beseder, so we see here in level 2 of decompression here, which is the Gemara now reveals what, as very important, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi knew Takas Nasina Shalom Kes, there's no question about it, that he knew it extended. He knew the other avos of Rav Chi and Rav Oshia, but when he wrote his very, very compact text of the Torah Shebaal Peh, he was writing the minimum to include everything and to leave, always leave, Torah Shebaal Peh. Torah Shebaal Peh never ends. I mean, they make statements like if all all oceans were ink and all the heavens were whatever, parchment, there wouldn't be enough to write down all Torah Shebaal Peh. It's an ocean. They call it the Yam HaTalmud, okay? So the idea here is to be able to write the minimum message that can be unpacked into all its fine details. And what we're doing is tracing. So we said the most compact stage is stage 1 of the Chumash. Stage 2 is the Mishnah. In this case, it says Avos. Stage 3 is the Gemara, which now is going to open up the text to a new level, in this case with the Gzera Shava. Okay, what's stage 4? Stage 4, let's look stage 4. Okay, stage 4 is what we call the Rishonim. Okay, the Rishonim. The Rishonim are, now there were Sevarayim after, the big schools, okay, very, very generally, but these things you can all read, and there's some very, very good books on the Masar and how it works. There's Anvil Sinai and a lot of good books nowadays. So I'm just talking the largest in the most broad strokes. The Mishnah was written in around 200 by Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, written down. Around 200 years later, Ravina Ravashi compile the Gemara, where they write down the sources of the Mishnah and any apparent contradictions in the Mishnah and the factors of the Mishnah. They write down around 200 years later the Gemara. Okay, now the schools, the main school, there was two main schools. The Mishnah was written in Eretz Yisrael, and there were two main schools that existed. One was in Bavel, and one remained in Eretz Yisrael. And that's, we get two Gemaras. We have the Gemara of the Bavli, written in Bavel, Iraq, and the Yerushalmi. Most of the work of explaining the Masara was done in the Bavli. Okay, so although we use the Yerushalmi, or not, we've shown them use the Yerushalmi, again, like the Brices are used, external text to amplify our text, but most of the work that we do in understanding the Torah and Torah Shebaal Peh comes from the Bavli. Now, the great yeshivas in Bavel lasted from 200, had great yeshivas afterwards, and basically until 1000, they were the center, and then there were people called Savarim, Gaonim there, and then what happened was the Torah started moving to North Africa and to Europe. Okay, around 1000. It's a whole story about 5 great Chachamim that were on a ship, and they were the ship went down, and they landed in these far out places. So you can read all the history; it's all available. But the point being, what happened was there was a switch, and Bavel lost the yeshivas in Bavel lost their strength and their light, and the light moved to North Africa and to France and Germany. And there were two basic communities. the Sephardic community, which was Spain and North Africa, which is basically the Arab world. And then there was the Ashkenazi community in France and in Germany. Those are two great centers of learning. The styles were, again, with broad strokes, different. The Ashkenazim were more analytic in their approach to handling the Gemara, and the Sephardim were more halachic oriented. They were more interested in the actual halacha. So from there we and again, these are broad strokes because the people move over. So you have the what we call the Meforshe HaTalmud, like Rashi, like his grandchildren, the Rabbeinu Tam, and then you have the halachic people, like the Rambam. Okay, he was born in Toledo. He ended up moving to Egypt, and they were even the Rif before him was halachically oriented. But I think we mentioned last week that the standard way of learning Gemara was to go through all the levels and to comment on the last level. Okay, and to explain the last level. So, for instance, Rashi Tosfos comment on the text of the Talmud itself. The Rif was the first one to go off that method and to give a kitzur, what is that called? A abbreviated view of the Gemara. He cut out all the give and take in the Gemara and just wrote down the conclusions of the Gemara. After him, the Rambam went a step further and redid the whole Gemara and the whole Mishnah and the Gemara in its entirety, and rewrote the whole text in his Mishnah Torah. And that was very, very controversial, of course, and people were very angry that he abandoned the page completely. In the middle, afterwards, so you had people like the Rush who had learned in Ashkenazic schools and then moved to Spain, of course, not under such nice conditions. I just try to get rid of that phone. I'm sorry. Okay, so today, basically those two streams keep going. There's the people who are analysts and are involved in the in-depth analyzation of the text in front of us, and there's the people who concentrate on the halacha. What do you actually do? There's certain people that are able to do both of them, but normally you have those two basic methods of learning. Now, of course, you have to have both. You have to know what to do. You can't just analyze all day. But as far as the yeshivas, you'll even see there's more yeshivas that are analytic in their approach and more halachic in their approach. And basically what they do nowadays is that, again, in broad strokes, the yeshivas do an analysis, and then the kid, when he graduates and he starts his family, they go into the halachic aspects and the kollels. But again, these are broad strokes and just meant to just demonstrate the broad categories of the way people approach. Anyway, this in 1100s, starting in 1100s, you have these two, this era of Rishonim, they're called, and they split into two parts. One concentrating more on the halachic aspect of the Torah, and the other one's more on the analytic side. One delving into the page itself, and one trying to categorize and recategorize the information. Okay, so that was our level. We had our level number one, we said it was the Chumash. Level number two was the Mishnah. 3, we said, was the Gemara, expanding it to all these other cases, to the Gezerah Shava. And then we saw here, for instance, Rabbeinu Hananel, who takes the text of Tachas Nasina Yishalom Kesev and he explains to us how the from those four words this din of Meitav spreads. Okay, the Gemara in its unpacking just said Tachas Nasina Yishalom Kesev. Everybody understood that at the time of the Gemara. It was all Torah Shabbat, how that integrated into the text. But as time goes by, people are weaker and weaker in their intimacy with the Torah and Torah Shabbat. So the Rishonim write down even more. So here the Rabbeinu Hananel, and also Rashi, by the way, spells out the system of how Tachas Nisham Kesev spreads to the Yodixis. Okay, is that clear? Now.
Yeah.
Okay, Ad Kan. Now, this is the point more or less where we left off, I believe. The Ramchal, Moshe Chaim Latzato, writes a book called Derek Tefunos. In the 1700s, the Ramchal lived. And in that book, what he tried to do is to give labels to the system of learning. What am I giving labels? Everybody knows how to learn. Okay. When you go through the Gemara and you put the visual logic into your head by reading the page and reconstructing the logical give and take, so then you become aware of the system. But that's done through a natural way. So for instance, I ask you, how did you learn language when you were a child? Well, no one sits a child down with a grammar book and explains to them what a verb is and what the conjugations are. You learn in an organic way. You hear the language and you organically learn it. Now the Chachamim have a language that they've embedded into the Mishnah and the Gemara itself. And also, by the way, the language is embedded into the Chumash. And that was the language that they imbibed naturally and spoke. So came along the Ramchal and said, let us try to give labels to the various moves in the Gemara. The Gemara does not say, I am now going to make a statement. I am now going to ask a question. I'm now going to give an answer. The Gemara plays the instrument. It doesn't tell you what the notes are and the scales are. So the Ramchal writes a book called Derek Tefunos, in which he abstracts the moves of the Gemara. Now, that's an amazing ability, the amazing thing that he did. I haven't seen this in my experience in reading books. Anyone who has done what he's done. He identifies 7 basic moves in the Gemara. And he says that when you read a text, this is what's going to be happening. One of these 7 moves. He then breaks them down into further subcategories, which again, I'm trying to be as broad as possible. We have a whole series of classes on the Ramchal. But I just want to give, again, an introduction in the broadest strokes possible so that we know what the system that the Ramchal created is useful and what it does. By identifying these moves, the Ramchal gives us a very powerful tool which is called conscious learning, which means that we can now label what's going on, and lo and behold, we'll see that these labels will be the core of many debates. Well, let's first go through these 7 labels just to get familiar with them. Okay, the first one is a memra. A memra is a statement. Okay. Arba Avos Nazikin is a statement. There are 4 categories of Nazikin. It's a statement of information. On a statement, you can do 3 things with a statement. that the Ramchal identifies. You can ask questions about the statement. You can prove the statement to be true or false, or you can show that this statement is contradictory because it contradicts some of the statement. Okay? So basically you have statements, proofs, and difficulties. Now let's look at it a little more carefully. If you're going to ask a question, for instance, there's a Mishnah that says, oh, our Mishnah, the Mishnah says, shor, bor, mava, and hever. Those are the 4 types of damages, categorical damages mentioned in Torah. So we know what a shor is. It's an ox. We know what a bor is. A bor is a pit. But mava and hever are very strange words. The Torah doesn't use those words when it describes its damages. So the Gemara wants to know, my mava. What did the Mishnah mean when it said the word mava? Okay, so that's a question. It's not bringing up a contradiction between our Mishnah and another text. It's not a statement. It's a question. Okay, so that's a question. Now, a question means that you would expect an answer. So an answer is called a tshuva. Okay, so my mava, the question of what is mava, happens to be a difference of opinion. Rav says mava is Adam Amazik, and Shmuel says mava is Shein Hamazik. Okay, then you have the question, you have an answer. Now, the next part is when you give an answer to a question or you make a statement, there's 2 things you can do. And it's interesting that Ramchal presented it this way. We won't get into it, but anyway, you can give a proof that the statement that you're saying is correct, or you can bring a proof that the statement that's being said is incorrect. Okay, so one is called a stira, isoter. You make a statement, for instance, and now I am not asking you about your statement. I'm not asking you for an explanation of your statement. I am now going to contradict your statement by saying your statement is false. That's called a stira. Or I might bring a proof to your statement. Okay, so if we're talking about what mava is, so you can look over there, and the Gemara brings proofs from the Tanakh that this word is used to talk about man, or is used to talk about Shein, an animal biting. Now, the third unit here is called the kasha and the teretz. And the kasha, I'm not proving anything true or false. I'm saying that there's something in the text that is problematic. So, for instance, our text says, Keshachav HaMazik, the mission that we're talking about, Keshachav HaMazik Chayv Mishalem, the person, Keshahezik, when a person does one of these 4 damages, Chav HaMazik L'Shalem. The proper Hebrew is not Chav, it's Chayav. So there's a difficulty in the grammar of the text there. It should have said, when a person does damage, he is obligated, he is chayav to pay, not chav to pay. So that's a kasha in the grammar of the text. And the Gemara gives a teretz that says, well, Atana is Yerushalmi, and they used to speak that way. That's just a little thing over there. So a kasha means that there's something difficult to understand in the text. Okay, it's not a question of information. It means that there's something that's difficult to understand. It's contradictory within the text. For instance, also our text says that there's Arba Avos Tazik, the Shor, the Bor, Mav, and the Hever. It uses the word Hever to talk about Aish. But the next line it says it's 2 lines down, Lo Zevizah Sheish Mem Ruchaim Kaharia Aish. So that's called a shinui lashon. The Gemara started off talking about mava and then talks about it as eish. Why did it change the language? That's a difficulty because we expect consistency of use of terms. So that's the 7 basic fundaments of the Shakavatara. You're either presenting information by making a statement, you're either asking someone to explain missing information, okay? You're either bringing a proof or a contradiction to the statement, or you're finding something that's difficult in the statement, either grammatically or in consistency, or in other words, the statement is inconsistent, or it is difficult to understand in light of another statement. Okay, so you're not trying to. Yes, go ahead, please.
Why is stira not a subcategory of kasha?
Because the stira brings proof that the statement is false. The kasha just presents a difficulty in the statement. It's not saying the statement is false. When I say to you, the Mishnah started out saying that there's 4 abnazikin and it called the 4th one mava, and then calls it aish. I'm not saying that the first statement is false and the second statement is right. We know that both of them are right. But the difficulty is that the language is not being used in a consistent manner. Are you with me?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. So I'm not, yeah, go ahead.
So, okay, then how is, I mean, I don't see it in precisely, it's just a question of precision. How is then a kasha different from a sheila?
A sheila means that information is missing. There's no a kasha means that the information is said in a difficult way, in an unusual way, in a confusing way, or a contradictory way. But the sheila just, for instance, it says Ketzad Maragdim Lifnei Hakala. Yeah. Okay? It says, how do you dance in front of the kala? So there's no difficulty there. It's just that no one told us. No one told us you're supposed to dance. Okay? Or for instance, when the Gemara says, "What is?" Yeah, that's a shaila. Well, the Gemara says, we know that there's toldos because the Mishnah used the term av, right? Toldos mai. But what are they? Now, I'm not arguing with the Mishnah. I'm not saying that there are no toldos. I just made an inference that the Mishnah used the word ab, so there must be toldos, and now I would like to know what they are. So that's just a lack of information. It's not aggressive. It's not showing that there's an inconsistency in language in the Mishnah or misused term. It's just saying that there's information missing because we know that there's derivatives, but we don't know what they are. Okay? So it's not aggressive. It's just asking for information. That's a shaila. A shaila is just asking information. A kasha means what you're saying is difficult because either another text says something else, or internally this text doesn't. This text is self-contradictory. Okay.
Right, so this is why I'm asking why stira is not, as I say, a subset of kasha. I see the difference. I mean, the stira is about a contradiction, and kasha is, and that's probably the most aggressive thing you can do is just say, well, you contradict.
No, a stira is not a contradiction. A stira means to lisater. It means to soter. That means, as he says here, it says that the statement is false. A stira says this statement that's being said is false. A kasha does not say on the basis of a proof.
Of another statement, no?
No. You have because of you have to prove, and again we have to, broad strokes. When a person makes a statement, if you're going to say that the statement he's saying is false, then you're going to have to prove. You're going to have to supply evidence that it's false. Okay, that's a stira. When you supply evidence that what he's saying is false, you're not saying what he's saying is inconsistent with another text. You're saying the statement is not true. Okay.
So it's really a stira is really a refutation.
It's a refutation. It's an argument of refutation. Yes.
Right. Okay. So then a kasha is not necessarily refutation. it's a problematization or a difficulty, as you say.
Right.
So I guess I'm just wondering, why isn't refutation a kind of subset of a kasha? In other words, it's stronger. It's the strongest type of kasha. Did we say that or not?
Because again, a refutation is proof that a statement is false.
Right.
A kasha brings up a inconsistency in a statement. The statement could be true, right? Like, for instance, we know the statement that there's four abos of Nazik in the Shul Bor Mava in the Heva. When I say that 2 lines later, Mava is called Aish, right? I'm not trying to say that there's not 4 types of Nazik and one of them is not Mava. I'm not proving that statement wrong. I'm saying that there's a inconsistent use of language.
Right.
And that we can't solve well because people, the biggest case, it says, there's a case where the Mishnah talks about a man putting down a cod in the street, and then it says when the chavas is broken. So the Gemara says, pasuk b'kad b'sayim b'chavas. It's an inconsistency of terms. Now, we're not trying to disprove the Mishnah. We're trying to explain the Mishnah by showing that this is a flag of inconsistency. So that's a kasha. We're going to give a teretz. The teretz is going to explain why that language was used. For instance, when we said, another case, Arba Avos Nazikin, then we said Rav Oshia and Rav Chia said more, right? So we're not trying to dispute our Mishnah. We're really just trying to understand on what basis did they say, on what basis did they use their system of categorization? But we're not trying to say that really there are 13 or 24 and there's not 4. Everybody knows what they are. It's only a question of why he used 4 and he used 13 and he used 21. Okay, so I hope I'm being clear. A stira means that you're bringing proof to refute the truth of the statement. Now, the other person may remove your proof. That's wonderful. He may also soter your proof. You can also do that. Okay, but the aim here is to say that what's being said is false and to bring proof to that refutation that it is false. Akash is just bringing up a inconsistency in language. Okay, and that's what he said.
And the raya then addresses specifically a stira, right?
No, a raya is a proof. In other words, it does come together with a stira, but it's a proof. It's a proof.
It could be brought in at any point.
That's right.
It could be brought in at the level of mimer. You have a mimer and then you have a raya, right?
100%. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
It doesn't go, in this order. It's very, very.
Right.
These are only the tags that can go on, and depending upon the debate, you're going to have to see what the tags are. Okay. Now, as I said, this is, as far as my limited knowledge, this was a very, very big chiddush, putting these labels of the Ramchal. And he breaks down these labels into smaller subcategories, not very many. And I always, when I teach, I always start with this a chapter in the Ramchal, and I believe it's chapter 9 at the end, where he breaks down it into a few other subcategories. Very 4. Maimer has 4, Sheila has 2. There's a few subcategories, but that's a very important opening. The father-in-law of my son, teaches in a cheder. He's a mashgiach, actually, and when the Rosh Yeshiva goes away, so for 2 weeks he takes over the yeshiva. So he said to me, let's see what you're doing. I explained to these steps in the Ramchal. After 2 weeks, the kids in the yeshiva said they never learned Gemara like that. Because since they had these clear labels and they were forced to say, what is the Gemara doing at every point, it added a tremendous amount of clarity to their learning. Okay, and that's why it's such a powerful, powerful tool. And really, the Ramchal continues and he tells us and explains the whole system of logical thinking, and that's why we spend so much time, and we have all these tapes and then we translated the books. It's very important to know because it creates a clarity in your nituach, your analysis of what's going on. It gives you the handles, those little tags. Those are handles to clearly define where you are and what you are. Okay, and that's a very important beginning. So that's the 7, and as I said, broad strokes. Let's let's give an example. Excuse me. Let's give an example of a live Gemara here, okay, and show how these elements are used. Okay. Again, what I'm doing is picking one small unit here, which is this law of Meitav, and opening it up in its various aspects so that we don't have to go to 12 different Gemaras, which you don't know, or you don't understand, never heard of, or you know partially, you have. I'm focusing on one unit here, one small halacha, and trying to see and demonstrate how each step is a opening up of the information to show the halacha in all its depth. So here's a Gemara, and we'll be involved in it. Again, these are broad strokes, but just to give a little bit of application. This Gemara in Baba Kama starts with a rumia. A rumia, again, doesn't want to prove anything wrong. It's a kasha. Why do we say it's kasha? Because it's a contradiction between two texts in the Torah. Rami le Abaya l'Rava. Abaya brought up a contradiction between two verses in the Torah. Kasiv, we just learned that in Regal and Shane it says Meitav Sadeu, Meitav Karma Yushalem. It says when the mazik, when the person does the damage, sends his animal in and it destroys the other man's field by eating or by stamping upon it, then that mazik, that damager, has to pay for the damage of the animal. What does he have to pay? Meitav Sadeu, Meitav Karma. That's what the pasuk says. Now, Abaya makes an inference, which when you look in there, you'll see is another type of statement, but he says, Meitav in media achrina no. Lo. What does that mean? Since the Torah used the term that you have to pay with the best of your land, so we can infer that you can't pay with anything else. That's all it says over there. However, there's another text that we have that makes the following observation. It's a brisa, and here we'll see how the brises are used to elaborate what we know in the information in the Mishnah. The brisa says the following. In Bor, remember we had that pasuk of pit. It said, Yashiv Kesev Lebalav, when the animal falls in the pit, gets damaged, so the owner of the pit has to Yashiv, he has to return Kesev to the owner. It's an extra word. It could have just said Mishalem Kesev. What does it say, Yashiv? So that extra word, which is another one of the ways that we know that the Torah is flagging new information, is to include Shaveh Kesef. What is Shaveh Kesef?
Is the word is there a grammatical, are these cognates, the word yashiv v'shaveh?
No, not at all.
It's not the same shoresh. It's not what it's saying there.
No. It just happens to be an extra word that was unnecessary. Again, we have to, and that's why I put all these classes on the net with the book Darkei Gemara and the books of the Ramchal, because there all these details of how we learn and all the systems are really, really spelt out. So one of the ways we learn is called a ribui, which means the Torah doesn't waste words. Whenever there's an extra word, it could have said something in 2 words and it says something in 3 words, we know that there's a new message there. Okay, so it just said Yishalom Kesev L'Ba'alav. What is this Yoshiv? Kesev, Yoshiv Kesev L'Ba'alav. So we have a brayso that explains that not when you pay, you don't have to pay only with kesev to pay back for the animal that fell, that was damaged in the pit, but you can also say with shaveh kesev. And you're right. It just says kol minei shaviut. You're right, Yoshiv. I'm sorry. It is a. I made a mistake. It's not only extra, but it comes. I think it does have the same root there. Yashiv. Yashiv, no, means to return. I'm sorry, it doesn't. No, yashiv means to return. It doesn't anything. But it, yeah, that's not right. I just felt you said it was.
What does subin mean again?
Now, subin means bran.
Per annum?
Bran, B-R-A-N. When
bran. Okay.
It's very healthy to eat bran nowadays, but it
used
to
bran. Bran. Okay.
Like bran flakes. I don't know if you have that in
right. Okay.
In Canada and America, we say bran is in. Bran is in. It used to be that bran was the worst. It was we used to throw bran away. It was practically worthless. Maybe animals would eat it. You have the nice kernel of wheat, and it's covered with some shell. So normally you take the shells, and maybe animals could eat it or something, but what you want is the kernels of grain, and then you grind them up and use them. Okay, but subin is good for food. Not good. It's an animal food. It can be used. I guess it could be used to make pillows. Who knows what? But it's a kinui. What's a kinui? It's a word which describes the worst type of movable object that has any value at all. Mm-hmm. Okay? Because if I said to you, kesev, money, and its equivalent, you would think, what's the equivalent of money? A nice gold watch, maybe a computer, that's something that's worth something. So we have this brayso that says, no, when the Torah said yashiv, you can pay back with the worst of your movable property, which is subin. Now, subin does have value. I mean, you can't pay someone back with air, unless he wants to pay for it because he has a problem with breathing. But but subin is the kinui, which means is the key word, which means the worst of any movable property that you have. Why is it called the worst? Because first of all, it's the price that you get for subin is very, very low. So if you're going to return, say you damaged $100 worth of this man's property, right? So if you give him who knows a watch, you give him one watch, and that's fine. But you're going to get bags and bags of subin. I mean, first of all, who says he needs it, he wants it, and second of all, he's going to fill up the whole house with the subin, So. Just 1 second. Reb David, I'm just teaching now, okay? Okay. So Abaya now has a room. It was a kasha. A kasha means that the Torah now. Go ahead, please.
Can we just back up to one point again, which I forgot. The Meitav Sadehu it's a different pasuk than Yashiv, right?
Yes.
These are two psukim.
Yes.
So the Tanya, how does the Tanya, the brayso, how is it connecting the pasuk from Shmois to Meitiv Sadehu?
Okay, let me be very clear about it. Abaya reads the Chumash, right? We're going to read the Chumash too. In the Chumash it says when a man sends his animal to another man's field, he has to pay back with the best of his field, right?
Yeah.
That's what it says. But we just learned that din of Meitav spreads all over the place, right?
Yeah.
Including the case of pit.
Right.
Okay? Now, in the case of pit, it gives us another alternative. it says Kesev Yashiv L'Ba'alav. When
in case of the pit. Okay.
you see?
That's what I wanted. Right. I got it.
Okay.
Right.
Now, it says clearly the word Kesev, but it says also Yashiv, which means, according to this brisa, Shava Kesev, the equivalent of Kesev, even Bran. Okay, so we have now a conflict.
Why isn't this a stira?
Because we're not, and it's very good you're saying these things because it's very important to clarify these terms. A stira means you're proving something false. We are not trying to prove the Torah false here. Are you with me? We're not bringing a proof. We're not bringing a proof that the Torah is not true when it says that you can pay with land, because it must be that you can pay with Kesev and Subin. That's not the function of what we're doing here. What we're doing here is showing a inconsistency in between two pesukim. Now we know that this is a flag to teach us a deeper level of information. Okay? If I was asking a stira, I would be telling you that this is false. It's not true that you could use meitav. It's not true. Soter, I'm saying the statement you're making is false. Well, we're not trying to do that here. We're trying to understand the statement by raising this apparent contradiction. It's a very subtle difference, but it's a very important distinction. Okay, I hope that's clear. We're not saying that this statement, we're not proving the first statement false. We're saying, look, that we know the Torah is true. And yet we see in one place in the Torah, it says you have to pay with the best of your field. And the other place in the Torah, it says you can use kesef, even the worst of your commodities, your movable commodities. These two pesukim clash, especially because we learned just before, Tachnas Yishalom Kesef, that the information is going to move through all these nezikins. You with me? Now, what is the contradiction? Yeah, go ahead. A stira means I'm proving something false.
Right, so I'm just to clarify, a stira obviously can't happen at the level of Torah itself, because the Kodesh Baruch Hu is not going to contradict himself. So I assume it also can't happen at the level of Mishnaic statements, right?
Yes, as long as it's the same person speaking, right? The same person. If someone else can knock out the statement, like Rabbi Akiva could be arguing with Rabbi Eliezer. You know what I mean? And he could soter what Rabbi Akiva says, because it's a different person. But the same person is not going to be inconsistent in his language. He's not going to,
Wait, but in other words, just to clarify, nobody's going to have the chutzpah to say that the Kadosh Baruch Hu contradicts himself. I mean, that's just crazy. But can you say, if you say Rabbi Akiva is contradicting Rabbi Shmuel, so what are we saying there? Are we saying that the oral Torah, Misinai, has an internal contradiction that also doesn't make sense? So it must be that some kind of interference has been run at some other level. It's not a...
Okay, so now now you're getting to a very deep level. Let's start from the simple level. The Torah is not... The Torah, by the way, the Torah we know is not contradictory. So whenever we see contradictions, we know that it's a flag for deeper information. We know that the great Chachamim are not contradictory. So the Rabbi Akiva is not going to contradict himself. If we do, we know that we didn't understand what he had to say. However, and here's a very deep point, that the unpacking of the information can be done in different ways. And therefore, Rabbi Akiva can unpack the information differently than Rabbi Shmuel. Because again, the keys of Torah Shabbat Peh are given over. How you unpack is a question of how you unpack. What elements you use to unpack the information. If you think that the analog is X, you're going to unpack it this way. If you think the analog is Y, you're going to unpack it a different way. So although we have the keys to unpacking, there could be, and there are, a difference of opinion how the information is unpacked. Okay? That is the deep level of what's going on. But any single person will not be will never soter himself. You could have a kasha that he said this here and this there, but you can't ask a steer on the same person. It just doesn't happen. You can't bring proof that what A said is wrong because, okay, is that more or less, are we clarifying the point?
Yes,
okay.
That's great. Thank you. I have just one more question now.
Yes, please.
To get back to the first word, so Rami means what
Rami,
exactly? I mean,
Rami literally means to throw.
Yeah.
It literally means to throw. Abaya threw two texts at each other from the Chumash. And by throwing those two texts at each other, he showed a conflict point. Okay?
So
here's our chart. So okay? Once
when he throws these,
yeah.
When he throws the two texts together, what is he questioning? Like, he's obviously not questioning God. He's questioning, as you're saying, that he's questioning two forms of unpacking.
He's trying to understand the message that can only be understood by the nexus of these two cases. I'm saying very deep things here. They're very because the information that we get comes from conflict. Not all the time, but one of the methods of unpacking the deeper level of information is through conflict. Okay? So, for instance, God put his hand on Mitzrayim. God doesn't have a hand. So now what does hand really mean? But if I don't if I don't see the apparent difficulty that, wait a minute, God doesn't have a hand, and yet he's using the term hand, then I can't get to the deeper message, which is, what does hand really mean now? Now that I know he doesn't have a hand, well, what does hand mean? Are you with me? And this is a very important thing because people are used to handling discussion as if one person is right and one person is wrong. Okay, which means even in the Gemara, it's a position is presented, and then someone asks the difficulty. So now the first position was foolish because he just didn't know the information supplied by the person who was answering, right? So there's the stupid person that's always asking the questions, and there's the smart person that's always answering. That's how people sort of view life. It's like, because I guess you're grown up that way. Your parents tell you things and they know what's going on. You're a little kid, but that's not what's going on in these high-level texts. Not with the Kodesh Baruch Hu, not with the Mishnah, not with the Amoraim, and not with the Rishonim. It doesn't happen that way. Everybody knows the information, and it's the arguments do happen because of how you're going to unpack it, and then they each bring proofs of how it's done. Okay, but here again, broad strokes. In this pasuk of Shein and Regel, it's said that when a man sends his animal into the field, ubia b'stei acher, okay, it says meitiv sadehu, meitiv kamer yishalem, correct? That's what it says. Yeah. Now this word yishalem we just learned is a bridge word, right? That's going to move this concept of meitav. Where's it going to move it to? Look where it's going to move it to. Where is it going to move it to? Bor. Now once it moves it to Bor, we have a conflict. Because in Bor it says, Kesev Yoshiv L'Ba'alav. Yishalem Kesev Yoshiv L'Ba'alav. I didn't write the whole pasuk out, and we're going to analyze the Chumash. But now we have a conflict point, because now the din of Meitav is now going to crash into the din of Kesev and Shava Kesev. Okay? Now we're going to have a dilemma. How do these three elements relate to each other? What do I mean?
So the question is really, I mean, it's at the level of Torah itself, right? I mean, or not necessarily. I guess really, the question is in a way questioning the Gzeira Shava. It's saying that the Gzera Shava that links these two verses together can be questioned. Why? Because we have two different approaches to how we pay somebody back. Either, one, we're talking about Shein and Regel, that the Torah tells us we have to give the best of our land. When we're talking about a bor, it's possible to pay with the worst property that we have. So how can we say that these two belong together?
Right. Now, the way you're presenting the question is what I would call a standard way of presenting the question. But the way I would like to present the question is that it is not a stira, it's not a contradiction. It is asking us to explain what the Torah means. I don't know if I'm saying that well enough. It's not that, well, the Torah says X here and Y here. The question is that the Torah, again, we said, is packing its information in such a way that it will tell you much more about itself than what you see in the black and white words. And one of the ways that it forces you to unpack the information is by saying things which conflict with each other. And once you can resolve that conflict, you'll be getting to the deeper message. It's not a question, well, it made a mistake and I have to now fix up the mistake. You catch the guy, he's telling a tall tale and now he has to cover himself up. There's no covering himself up here. Right. The question is, how do we understand the message of the Torah? The Torah is raising a flag and saying, look, I'm telling you this here and I'm telling you this there because there's an information in between the lines. Now, what is in the information in between the lines?
Well, that makes sense. I mean, I have no problem with the idea that the Torah speaks in equivocal terms, and that's a challenge to us. It's an just because the Torah equivocates doesn't mean that there's a mistake. It means it's telling us to think. But I guess I'm just asking, this equivocation is happening. It's mediated by the Gzera Shava. If nobody
100%.
mentioned that there was a Gzera,
right. If no one mentioned the Gzera Shava. But listen to all the things that we've been learning so far. If no one mentioned anything, I would think that the case of Shor and Regel is only the case of Shor and Regel. If no one mentioned anything, right? Now, all of a sudden, we're going to expand these subs like that. Hey, how did we do that? See? Now that is Torah Shabbat Peh. So we said one way of doing it is by showing that a case doesn't represent a particular case of a Shor and a Regel, but it represents a set of cases which are called Toldot. It's a principle. So once I know that the animal ate food, I could say anytime the animal gets hanor, whether it's eating, defecating, rubbing his back, you're also obligated to pay. So that was a expansion from the text. We always start from the text in its minimal view, and then we have to expand it. Now, we don't have to. There's whole rules that we can learn in this book of Dr. Gemara when to expand and when not to. But here, what I'm trying to say is the whole Torah Shabbat Peh is helping us get the real inside view of the Torah by giving us the keys of how these cases expand. Now, one of these keys here that it just gave us was Tachas Nesina Yishalem Kesev. Now, that causes a problem. Because if I'm going to take this rule of Meitav and I'm going to move it to the rule of Bor, which is Kesev and Shava Kesev, I'm going to have to say, wait a minute. There's a deeper level here of information being expressed. Now, as I expect you, just like the klal, the making a particular case into a general category by saying it represents a principle expands. So here is the other way that we expand information, by showing that there seems to be an apparent contradiction between two cases. Since we
does the word Rami always refers to this type of apparent contradiction?
Yes. Rami means you throw one verse at another.
It means specifically two biblical verses.
Yes. Yes, that's the term used. Okay. Ramile. I don't think it's used when it's used from Amoraim. or Mishnah. They wouldn't say there's Rami one Mishnah. It's usually used, as far as, again, my knowledge of Torah, it's used when two verses come into contradiction. Okay? So here it is, you see? But look how we get back to the
just as an aside,
mm-hmm.
you might find this interesting that the English word problem, it's really a Greek word, and pro-balo means to throw forward. It's like the word problem and the word ballistic are connected. Ballistics or even bulimia. So it's like a problem is a throwing. I mean, this seems like more like a throwing together, though, two things into each other. Whereas a problem is throwing something forward rather because it's too close to you, as it were. I don't know.
Okay, no. These things are throwing things at each other, okay?
At each other, right. It's a collision.
A collision, exactly. These two Pesukim, once we have Torah Shabbat Peh, are on a collision course.
Right, okay.
Okay? And that's the beauty of it, because it's through these collisions that the real message of the Torah is revealed. And that's a secret. That's a secret. Because to tell you that there's a generality and a specific, so you could find that in life too, that people don't use specific cases. But that contradiction brings deeper understanding is a secret. Many people don't understand that. And that's the beauty of learning. Abaya knows that there's no contradiction in the Torah. But if he doesn't raise this contradiction, he won't understand the deeper message. He'll just get a superficial message. Just like if he reads the Torah simply, he'll think the word Meitab only exists in Shein Regel and nowhere else. That's the beauty of Torah Shabbat Peh. The Torah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the keys to open up the text. That's why the Goyim, not only because they're not interested in doing all these mitzvahs, even if they were interested, they couldn't do them. It says, put totafos beinanech. What are totafos? Where is beinanecha? They can't handle it. They know that the text is too brief to take it seriously because they don't have Torah Shabbat Peh. And because we have Torah Shabbat Peh, we have the keys to open up the coding of the text to get down to the specifics, to where the tefillin is, what color it is, how many times you have to wrap it around, what brachas you have to say, you see? And that's the beauty of learning. So here, Abaya has a rumia, which is a type of kasha, which is not a steer. We're not trying to disprove anything, but he throws these two texts at each other. Now that you've established that there's Gezerah Shava Tachasir Shalom Kesev, these two Pesukim now beg us to explain themselves. That's what he says. Ramile Abaya l'Rava. Abaya asked Rava a throwing together of what you said a good word, conflict. You had a good word there. Collision. These two, what do you say? Worlds in collision. Pesukim in collision. Right? Exactly. Pesukim in verses in collision. Right? Okay. Now, let's try to understand, and that's why we labeled it as a kasha. There's no steer here. And let's just try to, again, understand it in large strokes. One pasuk says that when you pay, you can't give the medium part of your field or the bad part. You have to, the absolute best part of your land has to be used. And when it comes to paying with kesef, it says, you know something? You don't have to give money. You can pay him back with your movables. I mean, we talk about they call it chattels and real estate, whatever, land and movables. Let's call it in Hebrew. We call it metaltalin, things that move around. So when it comes to paying back with movables, you want to give him your watch, your computer, a bag of fruits, wonderful. But you can also pay him back with the worst type of movable possible, which is bran. Why is it the worst type? Because we said you have to pay stacks and stacks of bran. You know, who needs brand? Give him a nice gold watch. Okay, so that is the two Pesukim now on a collision course. So when we analyze it now, we see that there's three elements here, and we have to see the relationship of the parts, how they work together. So there's no less than 1, 2, 3, 4 answers to this. Okay, now let's give the first answer just to show what is a stira. Okay, so the first answer is like this. Abaya answers l'chara because he asked Abaya. Rava asked. I'm sorry. He had lo kasha. This is not a kasha. I will explain to you how to reconcile these worlds in collision. Kan midaito, kan balkorcho. One of these verses is talking about when he willfully pays back the person who he damaged, and the other one is talking about where he's forced to pay back the person who was damaged. Okay, and again, Rashi explains that if you want to pay back voluntarily the damage that you did, so you can pay him back with all the bran in your house. It's fine, as long as you pay back that $100. But if you force the victim to go to court and you lose, you're going to have to pay with the best of your land. Okay, that's what Rava says.
This is the difference between out-of-court settlement and
that's right.
taking up to the court. Right.
So on one hand, it's a incentive to settle out of court, and on the other hand, it's a request and a warning that we know something. If you're fooling around here and you just want to take him to court because you know who wants to go to a court case and waste all your time and this and that, if you lose, you're going to lose the best of your land. So it's a what do you call it? A de-incentive. It's it says on one hand pay now and you can pay with the brand. And if you want to play around with the guy and you don't want to admit that you did the damage and take him to court and maybe you'll win because he doesn't have witnesses or you don't have witnesses, some technical point, you know what I mean? And if you lose, you risk the rest of your land. Okay? That's how Rava answers him.
And Rava is saying that this applies across the board to all the cases. Then.
Yes. Yes. Anytime you want to settle out of court, you can pay him with the worst of your metaltalin, brand. But if you force him to go to court and you lose, so you risk losing the best of your land. Okay?
And this, you label this as a teretz.
Yes.
And a teretz, okay, teretz reconciles two verses in collision, as you're saying, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Okay. The teretz, just again to clarify, the teretz doesn't reconcile a stira. Like,
no.
If you have a stira, no.
Does not call a stira because again, we're using this is another word of caution here. The Ramchal has fashioned these labels, and he's told us his definition. In the world, people use these labels in general and fuzzy ways. Okay. And this is a problem only because the Ramchal is giving us a specific tool. It's to be used with his definitions. If another person uses the word, he has a steer between two pesukim, okay? So in non-technical language, it's fine. It just means the two pesukim collide with each other. Yeah. But by using the Ramchal, we now are clarifying subtle distinctions between different types of objections, let's put it that way.
Right.
Okay, and they're very, very, very important, as we'll see in a second. Okay, now here's a good example because we're going to have a raya and a stira. So now Oma Bre Devrav Eloi wants to bring a proof that what Rava just answered is correct. What's his proof? Daika nami. Daika means we can make an inference from what's written in the Chumash. Because the Chumash says the word Yishalem. Yishalem. And that means Bal Korcho. He must pay. Okay, so when it comes to Meitav, it says Meitav Sadehu Meitav Karka Yishalem. Okay, so he wants to say Yishalem is a tzivui. You must pay.
Imperative.
An imperative. That's the word. An imperative.
But Yashiv is not imperative form. It seems to be the same as Yishalem.
Kesef Yashiv. No, returns. He just has to return Kesef to the owner. Okay.
Isn't it? Okay, I thought they were, okay, my Hebrew's not so good, but I thought they were both imperfect forms. In other words, future, what in modern Hebrew is called future, but really the imperfect verb form.
Okay, now, we're going to, okay, we are not going to go to that depth, okay, which is, you're asking perfectly correct, but for this demonstration, I'm going to, again, keep it with broad strokes, okay? You're asking very well, exactly, and you'll see, listen to this, Omele Abaya. So Abaya says to Rev Eloy's proof, you see, he brought a raya, that he wanted to prove from an inference of the pasuk that it says Yishalem, that it means Bal Korcho, you must pay. What does that mean? The Beis Din tells you, you must pay. Right? As opposed to if you don't go to court, so Yashiv, you can return anything that you want. Okay? So that was the proof that Rev Eloy wanted to bring that Rava's teretz is correct. You see, he brought him a proof through an inference, proof through inference. But Abaya says to Rev Eloy, Omele Abaya, your proof is no proof. Mi kasiv Yishulam, Yishalem kasiv, midaito mashma. What does that mean? If it was, yeah, does it say Yishulam?
Yishulam means paid? What is
yeah,
Yishulam?
he shall pay. I think it's again, I'm not very good in grammar, I must admit, but Yishulam means that he is forced to pay. He is the object of the payment. Okay. Beseda, again, in broad strokes. It says Yishalem, which means Medaita. Now, that is a stira to the raya that Rebbe Eloy wanted to bring. Now, all the depths of the grammar, let's put aside, okay? We have to get into it and we can discuss it. But I just wanted to show in broad strokes again that Rebbe Eloy tries to bring a raya from the language. Now, exactly how it works and what perfect sense, let's not discuss that at this moment, okay? But he tries to bring it from the word Yishalem as if that's mashma, you must pay. And Rabbi Abaya says, no, it should have said Yishulam, it must be paid, as if the Beis Din forces him to pay it. Again, without all the grammatical interaction. But here, I just want to show example, there's a raya, a proof, and then Abaya is soter the raya. You with me?
Yeah.
Without all the details. Okay, the details are important, but so the proof that...
I think I get what he's saying. He's basically saying, I don't know the grammatical form of Yishulam, but if I'm not mistaken, Yishalem is the imperfect form, which is often like in the vernacular, it's often used to replace the imperative. You know, v'hayu letatafot b'neinecha. So v'hayu it's not imperative; it's imperfect. So it seems to be he's saying here, look, don't tell me it's Bal Korcho, because it's really an imperfect form, that he will pay him. It's not that he has to pay him.
Exactly.
Whatever.
Very good.
Yeah,
okay. So here we see an example of a proof. Here we see an example of a kasha, which means a difficulty between the two texts, a resolution of the difficulty by making a distinction of Bal Korcho and Midaita, a proof being brought by Ula, that that distinction is indeed correct through an inference of the pasuk, and a removal of that proof, a steer of that proof, to remove that proof by showing that it's not muchrak, that Yishalem means Bal Korcho. Okay? Now, then Abaye gives his own interpretation. Okay, and then it's destroyed. I'm not going to go through again. We have to go through all this very, very carefully. At the end, and maybe we'll okay, we didn't start on time, and I don't know how late you can go.
Yeah, that maybe we can stop soon. Yeah, you can see. I'm sure it's late for you.
Okay, let's just do the last example, because then we'll be ready for the next level. Okay, and again,
Okay.
we understand, and I keep reiterating, these are broad strokes. Okay, we're going to spend a lot of time with the Chumash itself and with the Mishnah itself. We're going to go through the whole series. The whole idea is to give a demo lesson that shows you how the system works. Then after you know how the system works, then you can go for it. Get a chavrus and spend 24 hours a day learning.
Could we go through this page? Not maybe tonight, but
Definitely.
next time go through this. Yeah.
Yeah. No. See, let me tell you what
It's
we're
very
going.
powerful to see how like right on the page.
Oh.
It is very powerful to see how it's broken down.
Right. So what I'm going to do with you, and bli neta, this is all bli. It's a lot. It takes a lot of time. We're going to go step by step here. But at first, I'm trying to give an overview because I want you to see the general system.
Yeah.
Then we're going to go into the system step by step and see very carefully how everything works and fits together. Okay, like this little problem you had with Yishulam, Mishalem, is that past perfect? We have to get into that, and we have to explain that. So we're going to have to learn more, have to be more careful with grammar, read people, whatever. Okay, but whatever here, let's just give a broad stroke here, okay, again. After 4 tries, which were all had steers to them, okay, I'm sorry, there was not fortress. There was this try number 1, and then Abaye gave his explanation of how to resolve conflict, and then the 3rd try. I'm sorry. The 3rd try is Rava comes back again. Look at that. So Rava really gave up his first part. And he says the 3rd try. Okay, I'm going to skip that one also because that's going to be knocked out. You see here, this is Teretz Gimel, which there's going to be a steer or 2, and this is the one. I'm sorry, I do want to concentrate on the 4th type here. Ella.
Yeah.
So we knocked out 3 attempts already. Ella, Kiyasi Rav Papa, when Rav Papa came, Rav Huna bereded Rav Yeshua, Mibei Rav, Pashua. An interesting word, Pashua. You know, see? They explained these 2 pesukim. Okay. How do they explain it? Kol milei meitavu. All movables are really called meitav. Even our dear friend Subin is called meitav. Wait, that seems a contradiction of terms. But no, I'll show you why. Why? De'i lo mizdaben hacha mizdaben b'masa achrisei. Because there's a bechina, there's an aspect where we can say Bran is called the greatest, the best. Why? Because if you can't sell it here, you just have to go down the block or to another place and you'll be able to sell it. Lebar mi ara, but ara is not called categorically good. Why? He says the leisev le mi meitav, the leisev le mi meitav. Since it's categorically not called good, and we have to explain all this, there, when it comes to land, you have to give the best of your land. When it comes to metaltalin, movables, even Bran is called good. Why? Because I can't sell it here. I could sell it somewhere else. Well, when it comes to land, that's not all subcategories of land are not called good. Why? Because I'm limited with the amount of buyers that I have, correct? Usually it's only the people around me that are interested in that land.
Mhm.
So, delay save lay mi metav. So the Torah says, since the buyers are limited, I must give the best of my land. Why? Ki heichi delikofotz aleha zvune. So that buyers will jump at it. Okay?
Right.
So, again, broad strokes. But Rav Papa says, and we have to analyze this, but he changes the definition. We thought the best you could, you have to give the best of your land. You should have to give the best of everything. Definitely not the worst of your metaltalin. So now, Rav Papa explains that there's a new aspect in which metaltalin, every type of metaltalin is called good. Now, if we analyze this a little bit, and we have to analyze it greatly, but you see, if the idea is that the person who was damaged, what does he really want? Let's say he wants his cow back, right? So the best thing you could do is give him money, let him go buy a cow, right? When you give him metaltalin, like this brand, he can quickly convert it into money, because if he doesn't, the neighbors around maybe not want the brand, but he goes down the next block, the next hill to sell it. But with land, he'll never get the money to buy his damaged property back again. Why? Because if he has 3 neighbors and you paid him back with the stony, rockiest part of the land, right? Who's going to want that? Who's going to want it? The guy you'd be stuck with a bunch of stones. That's totally useless. So the Torah says, no, you have to give the best of the land. This way, the person who was damaged could get his money back and get his cow or his field or whatever was damaged back again. Okay? So that's the 4th teretz. Now, maybe we'll stop here. Okay, we have a lot to talk about. What we're going to be doing, we're going to go to a 5th teretz, and then we're going to show you the next level. But I'm only going to show you the next level. I'll give you a hint about what it looks like. Okay, there's a lot here. Just to whet your appetite. This is what the next level looks like. Looks like a bunch of syllogisms that are being made with different premises. And we're going to see that based on this is the level of Rishonim, that they're going to set out a set of premises that is going to end up with the relationship of these 4 cases. So we're going to have to understand yet a little more background information. We have to understand on what basis are they going to now pasak. In the end, these are the poskim. These people are going to tell you what you actually have to do. And there is a machlokus in the poskim of what you have to do. Does it mean some say that you have to pay back with money first? If you don't have money, then give your movables, and finally then you can give the best to your land. Some say that no, you can pay with kesef or metaltalin. If you don't have those, then metav. Okay, so we're going to be investigating that next level of unpacking information. But before we do that, we have to do a little more work with the text itself. But you understand what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to go step by step, showing you how the information is handled, analyzed, and how the conclusions are drawn. And once you understand that that's the system, then you go through all of Shas, and it's all the same thing. I mean, of course, the content changes, but that's what's going on. Everyone only wants to know one thing. Ma Hashem mevakesh mimenu. That's all. What does Hashem want from us? That's it. Now, to do that, you have to be a chacham. You have to understand how to analyze properly, and you have to understand how the system works. But in the end, that's all anybody's trying to do. They're just trying to understand what Hashem wants from us, and then, of course, we're going to do it with the reasons, the hearers, and all those wonderful ways. Okay? That's it. So we'll stop here. Okay, at the level, we haven't finished really this Gemara, and Bezrat Hashem will pick it up next week. Okay? By the way, you're welcome to look at this Gemara too. You're welcome to look at the Gemara yourself. There's no secrets here. I mean, you're welcome if you want to look at the Gemara. You can. You know what I mean? Oh, they have it in English now. They have everything.
I have the art scroll of it. But are you okay with sending me this? Maybe I like the way you break it down.
No problem. No problem. I'll let you.
Yeah.
Yeah. No secrets among friends. I'll send this right over to you.
Right
Yeah, I'm gonna send the whole thing to you. You'll see. My idea also is, look, this is my composition, but through the feedback with you and through your input, we can make this thing better and better. That's what I'm looking for, because I really feel that this is a gold mine. There's so many people who are intelligent people, and when it comes to learning, somehow it just doesn't click. And I know why it doesn't click, because they don't understand the system, and no one tells them they're not understanding the system. They're just saying, well, this is what it says. Don't you get it? What do you mean I don't get it? I get what? You know what I mean?
No, you're 100% right about that. I think you're totally right about that. That's why I love this. I love, this is 10 times better than Art Scroll for me. I like Art Scroll, but this really clarifies it. You really see it.
If you'll notice, next time you use Art Scroll, I want you to look at the headings. You'll see.
Right.
They'll say, and Abaya asks a question, and Rava gives an answer, and you'll see that those little headings on top. That's exactly what they're doing. Is this?
Right.
But we're just going to develop a language through the Ramchal, Baruch Hashem for the Ramchal. What is Chus? Yeah. He gave us a language that we can define and be on the same page together, instead of having a fuzzy language of, oh, well, he asked a question and he gave an answer. Well, now we know we'll have to be a little more sophisticated than that. Okay, so Bezrat Hashem, I'll send this over to you, and your feedback is invaluable. If suggestions, corrections, please, the better we can make this.
I'm not at that level yet.
Okay, I understand. It's just the first time through, you know what I mean? But I'm sure, no, the questions you're answering also are very, very important, I mean, it's, when you have a difficulty, that means there's a difficulty. That's one of the things he says in Darkei Gemara. A difficulty is a difficulty. Either something is not being explained right, or you're not getting something right. But it doesn't matter, because he says, whenever you have a difficulty, don't make light of your difficulties. He says, sit on it until you understand, to resolve your difficulty. Don't just push it under the rug, because the rug can't handle all those things. You know what I mean? It's too small. He says, when you have a difficulty, it's a difficulty. So handle it, think about it, ask about it. Okay? So that's the method. But anyway, Baruch Hashem. So we'll see you last week. I'll send this right off to you, and you can look at it and enjoy. Have a great week. Goodbye.
Thank you. Have a good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.